Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Shorten Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And by Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.
From Commander's Palace Restaurant in the Garden District in New Orleans, we're out to lunch with Peter Raschuti. Peter Raschuti is Tulane University's A.B. Freeman School of Business professor and director of the award-winning Birkenroad Reports. It's business, New Orleans style.
Hi, I'm Peter Raschuti. Welcome to Out to Lunch. In Louisiana, we're all too familiar with the fact that we're losing our coastline at an alarming rate. There are a number of multi-billion-dollar plans for stopping the ongoing erosion of land. These plans call for various forms of water diversion and for building levees. Levees are basically walls made of rock or concrete. A company called Martin Ecosystems launched in 2008 and now has over a decade of proven success with a coastal restoration system that is a revolutionary response to building walls. Martin Ecosystems prevents storm surge, creates land restoration, and contributes other environmental benefits by building floating islands. These islands are made out of a material that's created from recycled water bottles. The product is called The Matrix, and this revolutionary process is called Biohaven Floating Technology. The president of Martin Ecosystems is Nicole Wagasback. Nicole, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Now, undoubtedly, we do have ecological problems here in Louisiana. Although they are serious, they pale in comparison to the enormity of the issues of survival confronting the nation of India. In India, the most pressing ecological problem connected to human survival is this statistic: 600 million Indians do not have access to a toilet. As a result, 450,000 Indians die every year from diseases related to eating or drinking contaminated food or water. Half of these deaths are children under 5 years of age. My other guest today is Anoop Jain. Anoop was born in Canada. He lived in various places around the world while his dad worked in the oil and gas business. And Anoop moved to New Orleans in 2000 and decided New Orleans is his home. While studying public health here, Anoop became aware of the Indian health issue and started an organization called Sanitation and Health Rights in India. SHRI builds and operates community toilets in India. The company has 40 full-time employees. The toilets create methane gas that powers water generators that transform the wastewater into clean, safe, usable water. SHRI is a revolution. Anoop Jain is a revolutionary. Anoop, welcome Out to Lunch.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Nicole and Anoop, you're both involved in very different operations, but they're similar in as much as you're both on a large-scale revolutionary mission. When you're involved in major projects like this, the process of getting people to buy your product is different than from trying to convince individual purchasers to buy something like a car or a piece of chicken. In your case, you have to convince governments, politicians, and all sorts of public bodies and officials to buy into what you're doing. I know this sounds like an almost stupid question, but in its simplicity, it's also enormously complex. The question is simply, how? How do you begin to convince the authorities you need to be convinced that they should let you do what you're trying to achieve? And you both have very tough rows to hoe here, but Nicole, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think from our perspective, like you mentioned, we've been around for 10 years, so persistence is a good attribute to have in this industry. We've used, historically, Louisiana has used a lot of different things to protect our coast, rock being primarily one of the major components, and everybody is used to using rock, so we've had to persist and knock on a lot of doors over and over again, and we've had to spend a lot of time and money in research and development so that we can prove what we are making is going to work, and then get them to say, okay, well, we can start to use this instead of the things that we've always used in the past.
Does it get easier now that you've installed some?
It does. So proof of concept, more third-party research has definitely helped us to keep going and to we started with a floating island, but today we've got 2 additional products that we've created over the last 10 years, and in fact we're working on a 4th. So
Our difficulty here is we're on radio, so I need you to try to explain what this floating island looks like.
We call it the matrix, and it's the base of all 4 of the products that we make. And so if you can envision a large Brillo pad, that's what the matrix looks like. So it's made from 100% recycled PET drinking bottles. We don't make the matrix ourselves in Baton Rouge. We source it from a company in Georgia, but we make our products. So in Baton Rouge, the floating island product.
How big is the floating island?
The largest that we make is 7.5 feet wide by 19.5 feet long. And we do make some that are a little bit smaller for ease of handling. But we also have another product that we pre-vegetate this matrix for levees and berms.
So you kind of stick young plants into the...
Right.
Wow.
So the floating island plants are grown hydroponically. So if you can envision a very large Brillo pad floating on the water, we inject the matrix with a buoyant foam. So that's what creates the buoyancy and allows it to float. And then we insert vegetation. Native vegetation was preferable into the holes that we pre-drill, and then they grow hydroponically. So the roots would grow into the water system below.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Peter Raschuti. I'm talking with Nicole Wagasback from Martin Ecosystems and Anoop Jain from Sanitation and Health Rights in India, known as SHRI. Now, Anoop, I've actually wanted to have you on the show for a long time because I've heard your story, and we talk about what Nicole goes through to talk to politicians and decision makers. I would suspect it's even tougher what you're doing. I mean, in India, you've got a lot of different political bodies. You've got a caste system. Some people think we have a caste system in Louisiana, so this might work out as well. How did you do it? First of all, were you sitting at class at Tulane and came up with this idea? You're supposed to be paying attention.
I know, I wasn't very good in school. I mean, so the idea was really born out of, it's an express need, in the community. So I started working there 2010. I just quit my engineering job. I graduated from Northwestern with an engineering degree. Was miserable, sort of commuting out to the suburbs every day. So I wanted to go do public health work in India. And that's when, I met these community activists who I work with to this day. And what we decided was that the need we wanted to respond to was the need for sanitation. And so what we wanted to do was, everybody we were speaking to, nobody had a toilet, right? And what we didn't want to do was get into the business of just building individual household toilets for everyone. There's a lack of space issue. How are we going to raise that money? Who's going to clean the waste? So there were all of these issues that were presented. So we said, how do we turn this into something that's a little bit easier for us to manage on this end and something that can be sustained long term? So we thought, okay, well, we can build community sanitation facilities that are, in very rural communities, free to use by the public. And then the way we were going to sustain them is use the methane gas from the decomposition of the waste to generate electricity, use that to power water filtration plants that filter raw groundwater. And then we sell that water for a nominal fee and use the revenue to.
So these are 2 separate sides. Okay.
Yeah,
all
they're
right.
they're two sides. They're all at the same facility. And so it's, but the selling of the water is what helps us, generate revenue to offset our monthly operating and maintenance costs at our facilities.
Well, Anoop, you're a very convincing guy, but you've got 2 parties here, right? You have the government you have to convince, and then I guess you have the population.
Yep. So, the population is easier to convince than the government. People want to use toilets. I think there's a lot being written about in the literature, academic literature, that people in places like rural India don't want to use toilets for a lot of cultural reasons, and we don't find that. I mean, I've been working there since 2010. I've never met anybody who doesn't want to use a toilet, right? They're not going to want to use it, if it's like a Jazz Fest porta potty, they're not going to want to use it.
That's exactly
right?
What everybody's thinking.
But if it's kept clean, if it's kept safe, if it's well illuminated, people are going to want to use it, right? And so that's what we guarantee. And so we have thousands of people using our facilities on a daily basis. The government is harder. There are a lot of initiatives that are being put in place by the government particularly to install individual household latrines. But again, the issues with that are where we work in rural India, the average family owns 360 square feet of land that's shared for 5 people. So there's not much space to build a toilet, right? So we now we're trying to convince the government that the community sanitation facility in some communities might be a better way to go. And that just takes, like Nicole said, it takes time, proof of concept, and persistence, so.
And when you, first of all, I've got to ask you this, because when I was looking up all the information, a lot came up about Bill Gates and his latrine system. How does it differ, or do you like that one? He's going to outspend you, I just want to let you know. So just,
yeah, I know that.
Somebody bring it up.
So I think in terms of the Gates Foundation, their mandate is a bit different. They focus mostly on urban India. So 70% of the population of India is still in rural areas. And that's where the burden of open defecation is primarily. So, but they're focusing on urban centers.
Okay.
The next is, they really want to focus on technology. For us, we're not trying to reinvent a toilet. Their campaign is called the Reinvent the Toilet campaign. We're not trying to do that. We know that toilets have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We don't need to reinvent it. We need to make it accessible. And so that's what we're really focusing on.
And can you, the same thing we had to ask Nicole is, can you give me an idea what this looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it looks like, it's not much different than the outside of a toilet facility at an airport, right? So separate entrance for men, separate entrance for women. It's just a standalone facility. Each facility has 10 stalls for men, 10 stalls for women. In the back of the facility is where all the water filtration plant is kept. Again, hand washing stations with soap that's totally free to use. And then we have delivery trucks that are out delivering the safe drinking water to families. And they're basically on these plots of land that the government hands over to us to support our work. So in some places we have little gardens. We use the waste as fertilizer to grow vegetables.
I can't imagine spending a big portion of your day trying to find a place to go to the bathroom. It's got to be really do something to productivity.
It does a lot to productivity. It does a lot to, when we talk about the lack of sanitation, we think mostly about communicable illnesses, diarrheal disease, but particularly with women and girls, ages when you're menstruating causes a lot of stress and anxiety and a lot of psychosocial consequences and negative externalities that are associated with not having a safe place to defecate. So
now, Nicole, your background is you went to LSU. You are a nurse, right? You were always a nurse?
Still am.
That's the way it works. But your background in discovering all this, seeing the need, is that you came from Lafourche Parish, and you were like sports people, your family, right?
We are. We're very much into athletics, and then also hunting and fishing and the outdoors. And in fact, my family still has a fishing lease in Leeville. I think that's been in our family for 4 generations, over 70 years. So we do love the outdoors, and that's what kind of led us to starting the business. Just our passion for coastal Louisiana and the marsh.
And your dad was the founder. I guess, if anything, you could see it all the time. I know when I go fishing, things aren't there that were there.
You are definitely right. In fact, the first time I went over the new extension of LA1 from Leeville to Port Fourchon.
Yep.
It literally took my breath away, because you're now at a more aerial view of what is gone. You can see it, as opposed to kind of just being in the boat, and you can tell that the marsh grass is gone. But getting onto that high rise just gives you this larger scale picture of what we've lost.
It's funny because it was built to make it safer to get you down there, but now that you get up to see it, it's kind of scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It is eye-opening. It's a huge challenge. It's a challenge for Louisiana to figure out how we're going to fund it and how we're going to protect what we have. But Louisiana provides a lot through our coast. We talk about it as a working coast, and so the port is important. And some of our work that we've been doing lately is with oil and gas companies, and they've got a lot of infrastructure that is
They've got a lot at stake.
They've got a lot at stake too.
Zillions of dollars of equipment.
Exactly. So we've all got to come together and figure out how we're going to protect what we've got left. And
So were you sitting drinking a bottle of water when it hit you? I'd love to find. Did it come to you in a dream? I always like those people. There's a.
in fact, my dad was on a hunting trip. So we did not come up with the floating island concept. It was invented by a gentleman named Bruce Kanya in Montana, of all places.
Yes.
His idea was to help clean water with it, which that is a part of our business as well, water treatment, stormwater and wastewater treatment. But
Basically, the vegetation cleans the water. Is that?
the vegetation, and then the matrix itself allows for microbes that are already existing in the water body to attach to the matrix itself, and then they begin to eat all of the bad stuff that is in the water. Typically, they don't have something to attach and stay in the water column. They die and then end up on the bottom as sludge. But the matrix allows them this substance to hold on to, and so that's how they can clean and treat the water. Right, so Bruce invented this floating island, and my dad was on a hunt in Montana with my brothers, and their hunting guide mentioned his name and kind of talked about it to him. And
Your dad's an engineer, I read, so
He
it's
is,
kind of guy
he
that
is,
thinks
and-
about this stuff.
well, and when we put it out there now with our coastal vegetation and saltwater grasses, it looks like floating marsh. So that's kind of where the idea came to starting Martin Ecosystems, because it does look like floating marsh. So they thought, why can't we just use it to help maybe restore some of the marsh that we're losing?
You're making your own flottant.
So we are.
That
We're
sounds
making
pretty
that is
cool.
exactly it, and I love the way you pronounce that. That is exactly it. Floatant.
No,
Yeah, so
Anoop, I've got to ask you a question. I'm just looking at this from a business point of view, and I see a problem in the finance side in that these units cost something to make, and then you don't begin to get the money until you start to sell the water. So what happens in that? I guess you'd call it bridge financing or whatever. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, we rely a lot on philanthropic contributions, foundations. We just secured a large grant from the Starbucks Foundation, Grand Challenges Canada, which is somewhat analogous to USAID, for example. So a lot of, our funding is philanthropic in nature. One of the things that I think is important to mention is, we work in one of the poorest places on earth. And so the margins are really small. And we're selling water for 0.8 of a penny per liter. And so there isn't much in the way of revenue. But that being said, our costs are also pretty low. So to maintain one of our facilities is anywhere from $600 to $800 a month.
And to build it?
To build it is about $30,000.
Okay.
That's all the toilets, the biogas tank, the water filtration plant, everything. And so, that's the capital cost. The ongoing O&M is about $600 to $800 a month. And so what we aren't able to recover through the sale of safe drinking water, we are relying on philanthropic funding. But that's not that much different than, a municipal utility, which a lot of them are running at a loss, right? And so they're subsidized either by
the upfront cost.
Exactly.
And,
And so they're subsidized either by taxpayer dollars, government, support, et cetera. And so I think that we are really trying to, that's part of one of our biggest struggles, I think, is, we are often pegged as a social enterprise. And so there is this expectation of sustainability, which, I think is a good thing to aspire towards. But I definitely think it's a little bit unfair for organizations such as ours that are working in the places where we work. Our bottom line is first and foremost serving the poorest people on earth, right? And that's something that we're always trying to communicate with to funders is, what are our priorities?
And one of the towns or districts you're working in is, I had actually never heard of it, but it was like over 100 million people. So, the scale is so gigantic in India.
Yeah, the state where we started is a state called Bihar. It's, as per the 2011 census, 104 million people.
Third of the United
U.S.
States.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's just one state, and that's the third most populated state in India. The average household is making $500 a year. Average family size, 5 people. As I mentioned earlier, 370 square feet of living space. So we're working with the poorest people in the poorest communities. and our mission from day one was to serve them first. I think the sustainability issue is something that we're always going to be struggling with. But I think that's why we have an incentive to try to get working with the government as quickly as possible, to find, the ways in which they can help us.
They get it, right?
Absolutely. The government of India has for a long time now been pushing for sanitation. But as you mentioned, I mean, in places that are as big as, a state with 104 million people, and a government that is so cash-strapped, they're also, struggling to serve. So
you're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Peter Raschuti. I'm talking with Anoop Jain from Sanitation and Health Rights in India, known as SHRI, and Nicole Wagasback from Martin Ecosystems. And Nicole, I asked Anoop about Bill Gates, and he said he wasn't really competition because those are urban. He was more rural. You have, let's see, there's a lot of other ideas floating around there that I guess floating. I never thought about that. But it's how do you compete? Are you competing against them? Do you view these as competitors, or are you all sort of in the same boat?
I think right now we're all still in the same boat because, as I mentioned before, rock is kind of the gold standard of what we've been using on, at least on shoreline protection.
Isn't it funny that Louisiana has no rock?
Right.
So,
we have
kind of an odd perspective.
We do have to barge it in. So we are all kind of on the same team right now, just trying to get into the marketplace and prove that what we're doing works and that we are a viable option, because we can't use rock everywhere. Some of our soils and sediments are too soft, and places that we've put rock out in the past, they sink. And so you've either got to go and decide you're going to recap them, or you're just going to have them be sunk and try something else. So we're all on the same team, I think, just to try to get people to look at other alternatives.
But it's funny when I think about you two, and think of you having competitors, but both of the needs are so enormous. It's like you're hardly fighting over a finite market. So, wow. Now, Nicole, one of the things that I was a bit it sounds like a conflict unless you live in Louisiana. Is a lot of your customers or the people you work with are pipeline companies, and we understand this in Louisiana, but you have a group here where I guess around the rest of the country they might say, oh, the big bad pipeline company, but they're helping you make this happen.
They are. They're not our only customer, but they are some of our customers, and they live and work here too, right? Most of their employees are Louisiana employees, and they hunt and they fish, and they want our economy to do well, and so they have a stake in it as well. And a lot of the guys on the ground who are in this field and see what's being lost every day too.
And you know what I loved, and I was doing the background research, mainly because I could really relate to this, is you have a duck blind.
We do.
Now, how does that work?
It's made using the same matrix material. We also vegetate. We drill the holes so you can vegetate around the blind. It's framed up. There's bench seating and
place for your guns and all that stuff.
Place for your guns, little shelves for your gloves, and dog kennels that are all manufactured and built on top of the floating structure.
And these get towed out there and stay out there.
They do.
That is very cool.
Yes.
Did Dad come up with that? Did you come up with
My
that?
brothers.
That was.
But I will tell you, probably some of the first meetings we ever went to, at least 1 out of every 10, somebody in the room said, well, man, y'all need to make a duck blind out of this.
Really?
So you can tell we are in South Louisiana, right? And there are hunters and fishers all over the place.
Listening to your customers, they say, is very good.
Right.
And it's
Right.
funny when I think of you now, Anoop's customers, in terms of paying for it, are the government agencies and things like that. But yourself, once you came up with this product, you now have a retail consumer and a government consumer.
We do.
That's
We do. We have government, corporations. We work a lot with NGOs also. CCA Louisiana and America's Wetland Foundation, Ducks Unlimited. Those guys are also out there on the ground trying to help save coastal Louisiana, and so we're working a lot with them.
Now, we all go about our daily lives believing we're each the center of the universe. There's probably nothing wrong with that. It's basic human nature. But once in a while, we get to meet people who remind us that there are greater issues in the world than those we face in our own lives. And we're fortunate that these people are out in the world addressing them. Nicole and Anoop, you are both those people. It's humbling and inspiring to hear what you're up to. And thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you both for taking the time today to join me on Out to Lunch.
Thank you.
My guests on Out to Lunch today have been Nicole Wagaspak. She's the president of Martin Ecosystems, and Anoop Jain, founding director of Sanitation and Health Rights in India. You can find out more about Martin Ecosystems and SHRI by following the links on our website, itsneworleans.com. The producer of our show is Grant Morris, our technical producer is Eric Merle, and our researcher is Maggie Mendel. You can listen to the show and to past episodes of Out to Lunch wherever you get podcasts, including Spotify, and at itsneworleans.com. If you want to know what we look like, you can find photos from this show on itsneworleans.com and It's New Orleans Facebook page. These photos were taken today by Jill LaFleur. You can find more of Jill's photos at lafleurphoto.com. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsneworleans.com and WWNO 89.9 FM. I'm Peter Raschuti. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Commander's Palace for more business, New Orleans style, on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch is recorded live over lunch at Commander's Palace in New Orleans. Commander's Palace serves lunch Monday to Friday, jazz brunch on Saturday and Sunday with live music, and dinner 7 nights a week. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And by Basics Swim and Gym and Basics Underneath Fine Lingerie, the It's New Orleans Happy Hour podcast. And by Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.